The content on the Untold Tales channel is protected by copyright. Unauthorized use may result in legal liability. When the masks fall, I came home a little later than usual. The rain was pouring down in sheets, soaking my clothes through, but I didn't care. I was exhausted. The office job drained me, turning me into a gray shadow, faceless, unremarkable. But I endured. For my family. For Ashley. For our son. As soon as I opened the door, the scent of expensive perfume mixed with the aroma of coffee hit my face. The living room light was on, and I heard Ashley's voice. My heart started beating faster. I stepped inside, took off my wet coat, but before I could even take a step toward the kitchen, her voice pierced through me like a knife. "God, Evan, you look like a rag again." My wife, Ashley, stood with her arms crossed, her dark eyes filled with disgust as she looked at me. "Will you ever get a grip on yourself?" I instinctively ran my hand through my hair. "Did something happen?" She snorted, rolling her eyes. "Happen? You happened." Her voice dripped with venom. "You are pathetic, useless, weak, worthless." I felt something tighten inside me. This wasn't the first time she had spoken to me like this, but before, at least, she didn't do it in front of our son. Tommy, our 5-year-old boy, sat at the table, gripping his spoon in his little hands. He lowered his head, unable to look at either me or his mother. "Ashley," I looked at her pleadingly. "You shouldn't say things like that in front of the child." She burst into laughter. "Oh, right in front of the child." Her voice dripped with mockery. "For what? So he can keep believing his daddy is a real man? So he doesn't realize you're actually a spineless coward? A weakling?" She stepped closer, her perfume assaulting my senses. But it wasn't the scent that made me sick. It was her contempt. "You know, I could have had a better life." Her voice dropped to a whisper. "Just for me? Do you really think I like being with you? Do you think I couldn't have found a real man?" I felt something inside me freeze over. Tommy suddenly jumped up from his seat, leaving his untouched dinner behind, and ran to his room. I wanted to go after him, but Ashley shoved me in the chest. "You're worthless, Evan. You can't even raise your own son properly. He's ashamed of you, just like I am." I swallowed hard. Every emotion boiled together into one explosive mixture. Rage, humiliation, shame, disappointment. Ashley turned and stormed off to the bedroom, slamming the door shut behind her. The long road to revenge, I ran a hand down my face, trying to wipe away the exhaustion, and took a deep breath. A conversation with Ashley was inevitable. I couldn't let this go on. Not this time. I slowly walked to the bedroom. The light inside was on, but the door was closed. I knocked. Silence. I pushed the door open and stepped inside. Ashley was sitting on the edge of the bed, one leg crossed over the other, phone in hand. The glow of the screen cast a bluish tint on her face. She didn't even look up at me, pretending to be too busy. I closed the door behind me and leaned against the doorframe. "We need to talk," I said quietly. She snorted, still not looking away from the screen. "About what?" "Your pathetic attempt to prove you're not a weakling?" I clenched my jaw. "I just want to understand." I crossed my arms. "Why do you think that?" Ashley slowly shifted her gaze to me. There was no regret in her eyes. No guilt, only cold irritation, as if I were a burden to her. "Do you really want to hear it?" "Yes." She sighed, set her phone aside, and stretched lazily, as if she was gathering her thoughts. Then she shrugged. "Fine. Let's start with the fact that you already know the answer." "Know what?" "That you're a spineless coward." "Evan," she said, staring straight into my eyes. "You cling to that pathetic job of yours like it's going to save you. You come home every day, miserable and exhausted, and still expect someone to praise you." I clenched my fist but held back. "You think working in an office makes me weak?" She smirked. "No, the way you see yourself makes you weak." She gestured toward me with frustration. "Look at yourself. You've accomplished nothing in your entire life. All you have is a gray suit, an old car, and a house we could only buy because I pushed for it." I felt something dangerous boiling inside me. "I work for us," I said slowly. "For you and Tommy." "For us?" Ashley shook her head. "You still don't get it, do you? I don't need a husband who just tries. I need a man I can feel safe with." She tilted her head, staring at me with pure disappointment. And you? You're just a shadow. I stayed silent. Look at our friends. Jeremy owns a business. Rick has 3 cars. Their wives go to expensive salons, wear dresses that cost more than your monthly salary. She swept her hands around the room dramatically, as if presenting a cheap motel. And I'm supposed to settle for this? I took a deep breath. You knew who I was when you married me, I said. Yeah, I did, she said with a bitter smirk. But I hoped you'd change. That hit deep. She picked up her phone again, scrolled through something, and tossed it onto the bed with disgust. I'm ashamed of you, Evan. You don't even realize how pathetic you look. You're not a man. You're a joke. Silence filled the room. I looked at her, feeling nothing but emptiness inside. A voice inside me told me to say something, to fight back, to tell her everything I felt. But I said nothing, because for the first time in my life, I understood one simple truth. She hadn't respected me in a long time. I nodded. Thanks for the honesty, I said, turning and walking out of the bedroom. When I closed the door behind me, Ashley didn't even call after me. She no longer saw a reason to. I took a deep breath, trying to push down the lump in my throat. I didn't linger in the bedroom for long. There was no point. Ashley had said everything. I slowly walked down the hallway, heading toward Tommy's room. The door was closed. I knocked softly. Tommy, can I come in? Silence. I carefully turned the handle and peeked inside. The boy was lying on the bed, curled up in a ball, facing the wall. His small shoulders trembled slightly. I felt uneasy. He was too young to understand the complexities of adult life, but smart enough to feel them. I closed the door behind me, sat on the edge of his bed, and reached out, gently running my hand through his hair. Tommy? He didn't answer, but I knew he wasn't asleep. I'm sorry you had to hear that, I said quietly. Tommy took a deep breath and suddenly sat up. His eyes were glistening, his lower lip quivering. Dad, why does Mom talk to you like that? I froze, not knowing how to respond. How do you explain to a 5-year-old that his mother despises his father? I swallowed. Sometimes adults go through difficult times, I finally said. Tommy frowned. But Mom always yells at you. I clenched my teeth. Of course, he noticed. Children always notice more than we think. She's just angry. I tried to smile. It's not your fault. You're not to blame for anything. Do you hear me? Tommy looked at me with frightened eyes. Are you mad at me? I pulled him into a tight hug, pressing him close. Never. I love you so much, son. More than anything in the world. He buried his face in my chest, gripping the sleeve of my shirt. Does Mom love you? I froze. My heart clenched. What answer is a 5-year-old supposed to hear? I slowly inhaled, stroking his head. The most important thing is that I love you, I said, dodging the question. Tommy nodded, but didn't look convinced. You're a good dad, he mumbled. Really? I felt something stir inside me. I ran my hand through his hair again, pulling him closer, letting him feel that I was here, that I was with him. And you, Tommy, you're the best son. He squeezed my fingers tighter and finally relaxed. I'm tired, he said softly. Sleep, son. I tucked him in, waited until his breathing became steady, and only then carefully left the room. When I closed the door behind me, fear suddenly gripped me. I didn't know what awaited me next, but I knew one thing. I wouldn't let Ashley take my son from me. Life went back to its usual course. Ashley didn't yell, didn't throw tantrums. She behaved as if I were invisible. She didn't ask how my day had been, didn't wait for me with dinner, didn't show any interest in my life. We became roommates in the same house. I existed to her only in formality. It would have hurt if not for Tommy. I tried to spend as much time with him as possible. In the evenings, we walked in the park, rode our bikes, and flew kites. Sometimes I bought him ice cream, and we sat on a bench discussing which flavor was the best. Tommy said chocolate, but I insisted on vanilla. This turned into an argument that ended with his bright, ringing laughter. No, Dad, you just don't understand. Chocolate is always better. That's because you haven't tried vanilla with caramel, I teased. He laughed and hugged me, and in those moments, I felt I had a reason to live. We went to the playground, where he climbed the slides with excitement, while I sat on a bench, watching him play. Sometimes other fathers approached, greeted me, and asked how things were going. They came with their wives, laughing, discussing shopping, weekends, family plans. I looked at them and felt emptiness. But at least I had Tommy. Sometimes in the evenings, we sat at home, building things from the construction set I had bought him for his last birthday. "Dad, were you ever strong?" he asked unexpectedly one evening, carefully stacking plastic bricks into a wall. I froze. "What do you mean?" "Well, Mom says you're weak." He lowered his eyes as if ashamed of his words. "But you're not weak, right?" I swallowed. "Tommy, strength isn't just muscles or money," I said slowly. "Strength is when you don't give up, even when it's hard. When you take care of the ones you love." He looked at me and nodded. "Then you're strong." I felt something warm spread inside my chest. "Thank you, son." I tried not to think about the future. I lived day by day, cherishing these moments, walks, conversations, Tommy's laughter. But even though I tried to ignore it, I could feel something was coming. I didn't know what exactly, but soon everything was going to change. I came home a little later than usual. The day at the office had completely drained me. Endless reports, the boss's constant nitpicking, phone calls that seemed like they would never stop. I dreamed of only one thing: to come home, have dinner, spend the evening with Tommy, and maybe read before bed. But when I opened the door, I was met with silence. There was no sound of the television, no child's laughter, no smell of food. I froze on the threshold, listening. "Ashley?" I called out. "Tommy?" Silence. I walked into the living room. Everything was untouched: the couch, the blanket, the coffee table with a couple of scattered books that Tommy usually read before bed. But they weren't here. Maybe they had gone out for a walk. I absent-mindedly peeked into the kitchen. Empty. No pots on the stove, not even a plate with leftover dinner. I opened the fridge, and an uneasy feeling hit me. The fridge was nearly empty. A few cans of soda, an open pack of butter, a carton of milk that was close to expiring. I shut the door and ran my hands over my face. What the hell? Ashley never cooked for me, but she always made sure Tommy had something to eat. And now nothing. I pulled out my phone and dialed her number. The dial tone: 1, 2, 3. The subscriber is unavailable. Please leave a message after the tone. I put the phone back in my pocket and clenched my fists. Where had she gone? Where was Tommy? Why wasn't she answering? I paced around the apartment, checking every room. Everything in the bedroom was in place. Her clothes, her makeup, her purse casually tossed onto the vanity. The kids' room also showed no signs of hasty departure. Toys neatly on the shelves, the bed carefully made, Tommy's pajama pants folded over the chair. But they weren't home. I slowly sat on the edge of the bed, feeling a dull anxiety growing inside me. Everything felt too strange. I pulled out my phone and checked the screen again. The time wasn't late, 7:30 p.m. I decided to wait. It's not that late. I could have just waited for them to come back. But something inside me wouldn't settle. That empty kitchen, the fridge with barely anything in it. Usually, even if Ashley didn't cook, she at least left food in the house. Had she forgotten to buy groceries? Or just didn't feel like it? I sighed and stood up. Since that was the case, I might as well go to the store myself. At least it would give me something to do, something to distract myself. I grabbed my keys, threw on my jacket, and left the apartment. The sky was darkening, but it was still light outside. The summer evening was warm, the air filled with the scent of freshly cut grass and wet asphalt after the rain. People strolled leisurely along the sidewalks, some walking their dogs, couples sitting on benches, chatting about their own things. Life was moving along as usual. I reached the nearest supermarket, and the automatic doors slid open, letting me inside. It was pleasantly cool inside, the displays glowing with a steady white light, the air carrying a mix of fresh bread, fruit, and something meaty. I grabbed a cart and slowly walked through the aisles, picking up everything I needed. Bread. Tommy loves toast in the mornings. Milk. He always drinks it before bed. Eggs. For an omelet in the morning. Chicken. I can roast it. Vegetables. Tommy doesn't really like them, but if seasoned well, he eats them without complaints. I moved through the store, selecting groceries, and unexpectedly caught myself feeling something I hadn't felt in a long time: calmness. There was something reassuring about this ordinary, mundane task, grocery shopping. You pick out what you need, pay for it, bring it home. Everything is clear. No chaos. When I reached the checkout, a young couple stood in front of me. The man, tall and dressed in a dark shirt, had his arm wrapped around his wife's shoulders, and she laughed, poking him in the side. He whispered something to her, and she playfully nudged him away. I looked away. I wouldn't have paid attention to something like this before. But now, I silently paid for my groceries, took my bags, and left. By the time I got home, it was 7:55 p.m. The apartment was still empty. I set the bags down on the table, took out the chicken, vegetables, and seasonings. Cooking had never been my strong suit, but I knew I could handle it. At least for Tommy. I rinsed the chicken fillet, cut it into pieces, and marinated it with spices. While the meat absorbed the flavors, I chopped up potatoes, spread them on a baking sheet, drizzled them with olive oil, and put them in the oven. Then I chopped vegetables for a salad. Tomatoes, cucumbers, bell peppers. I turned on the kettle. 8:15 p.m. Ashley and Tommy still weren't home. I stood at the stove, stirring the chicken, and felt the unpleasant anxiety creeping back in. The smell of roasted potatoes and fried chicken filled the kitchen, creating a sense of warmth that had long been absent from this house. I set the plates on the table, turned off the oven, leaned back against the chair, and checked the time again. 8:35 p.m. Tommy and Ashley were still not home. I pressed my lips together. For a moment, I considered calling her again, but I changed my mind. What would it change? She would either ignore the call or answer with an irritated, dismissive remark like, "Not your concern." I was just about to pour myself a glass of water when I heard the sound of the lock clicking. I slowly stood up, turning toward the door. Tommy walked in first, but instead of running up to me joyfully, as he usually did, he hesitated in the doorway. I frowned. "Hey, buddy." He avoided my eyes, gripping something in his hands. I glanced down. A toy car. New. Judging by the shiny surface and the packaging, it had been bought just a couple of hours ago. I looked at Ashley as she walked in behind him. She lazily kicked off her shoes, tossed her purse onto the shelf, and headed to the cabinet, pulling out a wine glass. "Decided to go for a walk?" I asked calmly. "Yeah," she tossed out, pouring herself almost a full glass. Tommy was home all day, so I thought I'd entertain him. I looked at my son again. He didn't seem happy. Usually, whenever he got a new toy, he couldn't contain his excitement. He would immediately show it to me, start rolling it on the floor, eagerly explaining how cool the suspension was or how the wheels lit up. But now, he was holding the car in his hands and not playing with it. "What do you have there, Tommy?" I asked, crouching down in front of him. "Mom bought it," he answered quietly, not lifting his eyes. "Really?" I looked at Ashley. She took a sip of wine and shrugged. "I just wanted to make him happy." Something was off. I turned back to Tommy. "Are you happy?" "Yeah." His voice sounded unsure. He still wouldn't look me in the eye. I felt anxiety rising inside me. "Tommy, are you sure?" He pressed his lips together, lowered his head, and only nodded. A cold feeling of foreboding crept into my gut. Something had happened. But what? A week passed. A regular, routine week, no different from the previous ones. I worked, tried to spend time with Tommy, and Ashley continued to ignore my existence. I had grown used to it, or more accurately, learned not to pay attention to it. But one evening, when I came home, I found the apartment empty again. No wife. No son. The fridge was nearly empty. No notes. No messages. I pulled out my phone and dialed her number. After a few rings, an irritated voice came through the receiver. "What? Where are you?" I asked calmly. "We went out." Her tone was indifferent, almost lazy. "Where exactly?" A pause. Then a short chuckle. "Evan, don't start. I'm with Tommy. Everything's fine. We'll be home soon." The call disconnected. I slowly lowered the phone onto the table. This was no longer a coincidence. Over the past few days, I started noticing changes in Tommy. He had become quieter, more withdrawn, spending a lot of time in his room. He played with his toys, but not the way he used to, without enthusiasm, as if just going through the motions. I watched him, but didn't push. And then, one weekend, when we went out for a walk, I finally became certain something was wrong. We were walking through the park. I held his hand, but I could feel how sluggishly he walked, as if something was weighing him down. I decided to try and cheer him up. How about the carousel? I suggested with a smile. Remember how much you loved riding the one with the horses? He didn't react, just shrugged. Before, Tommy loved carousels. He could go on the same ride 3 or 4 times in a row, laughing and waving at me from the top. I frowned, but didn't let it show. Or maybe we could get some ice cream? Chocolate, your favorite. He suddenly stopped abruptly. I turned to him and saw his lips trembling, his eyes welling up with tears. Tommy? He clenched his little fists, trying to hold it in, but suddenly broke down sobbing right in the middle of the park. I immediately crouched down, gently holding his shoulders. Hey, what happened? You can tell me. He shook his head, buried his face in my chest, and kept crying softly. I hugged him tighter, feeling my anxiety grow. Whatever it was hurting him, and I was going to find out what it was. I held Tommy tighter, feeling his small body tremble with sobs. It's okay, son, I said quietly, stroking his back. You can tell me what happened. He kept trembling, but his hands clutched at my shirt desperately, as if he feared I would disappear if he let go. Tommy. I leaned down, looking into his eyes. I'm here. You can trust me. He sniffled, wiped his nose on the sleeve of his t-shirt, and whispered, I don't like it when Mom and Luke yell loudly. Time seemed to slow down. I blinked. Who? My voice came out hoarse, as if I didn't recognize it myself. Tommy scrunched up his nose, his lips quivering. Luke, he repeated softer this time, as if afraid he had said too much. I felt my pulse pounding in my temples. Luke, a man's name, unfamiliar to me, but clearly familiar to my son. And it wasn't just a name. Mom and Luke yelled loudly. Images of the past weeks flashed through my mind. Ashley and Tommy's sudden disappearances. Tommy's lack of excitement over the new toy. Ashley's cold, dismissive tone when rejecting my calls. I looked at my son, who was still quietly sniffling, and felt something inside me snap. I finally understood what had been brewing all this time. I gently wiped the tears from Tommy's face with my palm. He was still sniffing, his fingers gripping the edge of my shirt tightly. Son, can you tell me? I spoke softly, careful not to startle him. When do Mom and Luke yell? He sniffled again, blinked, and his frightened brown eyes met mine. When we go to Luke's place, his voice was barely a whisper. I froze. To his house? Tommy nodded, nervously biting his lip. I could feel something dark and heavy rising inside me. And what happens then? I try to keep my voice calm, but even I could hear the edge of steel creeping into it. Tommy looked away. Mom turns on cartoons for me, really loud. He hesitated, as if afraid to continue. I squeezed his small hand gently, letting him know I was here. And then they leave, he murmured. My heart slammed against my ribs. Where? He shrugged. Into another room. They closed the door. I felt my fist clench. Do they yell there often? Tommy nodded. Sometimes Mom too, but then they start talking again and laughing. My brain refused to process it. She took our son there, sat him in front of the TV, drowning out the noise, and left with another man. I took a deep breath through my nose, battling the storm rising within me like a brewing thundercloud. And what happens after that? Tommy squirmed uncomfortably, clearly not wanting to say more. Son, this is very important. I need to know. He pressed his lips together, then finally mumbled. Then we go to the mall. Mom buys me something. I clench my jaw. What exactly? Well, a toy or ice cream. But he hesitated. But he swallowed hard and looked away again. She tells me not to tell you. Damn it. I sat there, feeling my entire body tense with rage. Ashley used my son. She wasn't just cheating. She was hiding behind Tommy like a shield, bribing him with gifts, teaching him to lie to me. I felt my fingers tremble with fury. Tommy looked at me, frightened. He saw something change in my face. I immediately pulled myself together and hugged him again, stroking his back. Tommy, thank you for telling me. I leaned closer, keeping my voice steady and calm. This is not your fault. You did everything right. He buried his face in my chest again, while I stared into the emptiness. Inside me, a plan was already forming. Ashley had no idea who she was playing with, but soon she would. I sat in the living room, watching Tommy play with his toy cars on the carpet, while inside me, rage boiled. Ashley, that vile, deceitful woman. She hadn't just cheated on me, she had dragged our son into it. She made him an accomplice in her filthy game. She bribed him with toys and chocolate ice cream, forcing him into silence. And I couldn't let this continue. But I couldn't reveal myself yet. I took a deep breath, thinking about how to play this game the right way. If I confronted her, if I caused a scene, she would become more cautious. She might even come up with a way to isolate me from Tommy, paint me as an unstable father in court if things led to divorce. No, I would play the long game. When Ashley returned that evening, I met her with a calm gaze. Hey, she didn't even look at me, tossing her bag on the table and pouring herself a glass of wine. We need to talk, I said in an even tone. She choked on her sip, but quickly composed herself. As long as it's not another pathetic attempt to ask where I was, she scoffed, sinking into a chair and crossing her legs. God, how I despise you. But I didn't show it. I've decided to work from home for a while, I said without blinking. Her eyes narrowed. Since when? Tommy is growing up, I shrugged. I want to spend more time with him. You don't mind, do you? She made a poor attempt at pretending to be indifferent, but I saw the tension in her posture. Do whatever you want, she threw out. Just don't bother me. I nodded. Oh, don't worry, sweetheart. I won't bother you. But now, Tommy wouldn't be with you during those moments. You would have to carry on your dirty affair without cover. And that meant I would see you for what you really are. I stared at her calmly, but inside me, a storm raged. Ashley thought she was clever, thought she could fool me, that I would remain the weak, pathetic man in her eyes, so clueless that he wouldn't even suspect his wife had been taking their son along to her dirty little secrets. But now I knew everything. I saw every move she made, understood every lie she told. And now the game would be played by my rules. I didn't cause a scene. I didn't throw a fit. I simply waited. Days passed, and I watched. I gathered information. I studied her habits. When she left the house, how long she spent shopping at the mall. When she made calls, thinking I wasn't listening. I watched. I memorized. I analyzed. But most importantly, I planned. A plan that would make her regret the day she ever decided to betray me. She thought she could crush me. But soon, she would understand she had made a mistake. A fatal one. The day of revenge had come. I knew Ashley would be with Luke today. And I knew where. I entered Luke's apartment silently. The door wasn't locked, only latched shut. That was enough. I knew that Ashley and her lover were too preoccupied with each other to hear anything. But I wanted them to hear me. With a loud slam, I shut the door behind me. The sound echoed through the room like a gunshot. On the couch, tangled in a mess of discarded clothes, Ashley froze, her body still arched in ecstasy, but her face contorted in horror. She shoved Luke away, scrambling to pull the sheet over herself. Luke turned around. The smirk vanished from his face instantly. What the fuck? He roared, stumbling back. You tell me, asshole, what the fuck this is, Evan said slowly, shutting the door behind him. I see you're making yourself comfortable. He shrugged off his jacket, rolled up his sleeves. Luke took a step back, but there was nowhere to go. Man, let's talk, okay? His voice wavered. It's just... Evan stepped forward. Just you fucking my wife? Just my son sitting behind a door while you two fucked like animals? Luke didn't get a chance to answer. The first punch landed straight in his jaw. A sickening crack. Luke staggered backward, slamming against the wall. Ashley screamed, but Evan didn't even look at her. He grabbed Luke by the hair, yanked him up, and drove his knee into his gut. A dull thud. Luke doubled over, a choked, wheezing groan escaping his lips. You're nothing but a filthy animal, you piece of shit, Evan snarled. I should have broken you the first damn day. Another punch, this time straight into his nose. Luke screamed, collapsing to his knees, clutching his face as blood gushed between his fingers. Evan, stop! Ashley shrieked, clutching the bedsheet against herself. You'll kill him. Evan whipped around. Shut the fuck up, whore. I'm not done with you yet. Evan turned back to Luke. Luke was crawling on his elbows, trying to back away, but Evan didn't let him. A swift kick to the ribs. Ugh! Luke choked out, his body convulsing in pain. Are you listening to me, you piece of shit? Evan crouched down, grabbing him by the throat and pressing his face into the floor. If you go to the cops, I'll make sure everyone knows exactly what kind of scumbag you are. They'll all find out how you were fucking another man's wife while her son sat behind the door. They'll know all your dirty little secrets. Got it? Luke trembled. You what? Evan squeezed harder. You got something to say, you miserable fuck? Luke shook his head frantically, wheezing. Good. Evan let go, and Luke collapsed onto the floor, gasping for air. He barely pushed himself up onto his elbows, his face covered in blood, his eyes swollen shut. Evan straightened up and looked at Ashley. She was trembling, trying to keep a mask of defiance on her face, but he saw the fear in her eyes. Oh, sweetheart, Evan murmured. We're going to have a long conversation. A very long conversation. Luke lay on the floor, writhing, his face smeared with blood, drops falling from his nose and busted lip onto the wooden floor. He gasped for air, trying to steady himself. Ashley had curled up in the corner of the couch, pulling the sheet over her shoulders, her eyes wide with terror. But it wasn't fear for Luke. She was afraid of me, and she was right to be. I had no intention of hitting her. I didn't need to sink to her level, but she was going to feel every ounce of my hatred. I walked toward her slowly, never breaking eye contact. So, Ashley, how does it feel? I leaned in, staring into her pale, frozen face. Did you think you could do whatever the fuck you wanted? That I'd never find out? She trembled but still tried to fake contempt. You're a fucking psycho, Evan, she spat. You're pathetic. I grabbed her face, squeezing her cheeks so hard she choked on her own words. Pathetic? I hissed, forcing her back into the couch. Am I pathetic? Or is it you? The disgusting bitch who spread her legs for this fucking trash while our son sat in the next room? Her eyes went wide, but she said nothing. Did you know he cried? I continued in a cold, deadly voice. Did you know he came to me and told me how you two screamed while he sat in front of the TV, stuffing his face with chocolate ice cream, trying to block it out? Her lips trembled, but she stayed silent. You are a disgusting, filthy piece of shit, Ashley, I said, finally letting go of her face. I straightened up and turned to Luke. He had barely managed to lift himself, his body swaying, his face a battered mess. I won't. He began, but I slammed my boot into his stomach. He collapsed again, clutching his gut. I crouched down, yanking his head back by his hair. You are going to disappear from my life. You hear me? I stared into his tear-filled, terrified eyes. You're going to forget my address, forget Ashley's name, forget everything that happened. You will not look for her. You will not text her. You will not even fucking glance in her direction. You will vanish. Luke was shaking. I understand. I shoved him back onto the floor, watching him gasp for air. Then I turned to Ashley. You're going home, I said quietly. And I promise you, you're not getting away with this. She shook, but she still tried to spit out something venomous. You don't control me, Evan. I do whatever the fuck I want. I smirked. That's where you're wrong, sweetheart. From now on, you'll only do what I allow. I turned back to Luke, who was crawling toward the wall, trying to catch his breath. And one last thing, asshole, I sneered. If you ever even think about revenge or coming near me again, I will find you and finish what I started. And no one will be able to help you. Luke froze, too scared to even breathe. I straightened up, turned toward the door, and walked out of the apartment without looking back. I left them there in the mess they created themselves. But my conversation with Ashley wasn't over. No, with her, everything was just beginning. Ashley had always thought she was untouchable. She loved to lie, to pretend, loved showing the world her perfect life. But I knew exactly who she really was. And now, so would everyone else. I wasn't going to rush this. No, I needed her to fall slowly, to feel everything collapse around her and be powerless to stop it. I started with the first strike. First strike, friends. Ashley craved attention. She spent hours sitting in cafes with her girlfriends, talking about miserable women stuck in bad marriages, always making sure to take jabs at me. I had overheard her mocking me in conversations, saying it's time to find a real man instead of being stuck with this dead weight. She thought it would stay between them. She was wrong. I knew the most talkative of her friends, the one who would never pass up a chance to spread a juicy scandal all over town. And she was the one I sent the first anonymous message to. Inside were photos of Ashley leaving Luke's apartment. There were recordings of her phone calls, laughing as she talked about how easy it was to fool me. There were text messages between her and Luke, where she bragged about distracting Tommy with cartoons while they fucked in the next room. By the next day, the rumors had already spread like wildfire. When she went to meet her friends at the cafe, acting as if nothing had happened, she was greeted with dead silence. Well, one of them drawled, holding up her phone with a message displayed on the screen. Ashley took it, read it, and went pale. Her hands trembled, and in her shock, she spilled coffee all over herself, yanking her hand away so fast that the cup crashed onto the floor with a loud clatter. But no one rushed to help her. "Did you really think we were all idiots?" Someone asked coldly. "You complained about your husband while you were fucking someone else behind his back." Disgusting. Ashley shook, her fingers gripping the phone so tightly her knuckles turned white. Then, without a word, she turned and ran out. But that was only the first step. I wanted to make sure she had nowhere left to run. Second strike. Her reputation, Ashley always kept up appearances. She was well known at clubs, high-end salons, and in business circles where she tried to present herself as a successful woman. She thought she could keep her dignity intact, despite the personal scandal. But I made sure that illusion crumbled too. I sent anonymous messages to her yoga club where she loved lecturing women about how they should keep men in check. An exclusive women's network where she had recently been accepted. The elite beauty salon where she had spent thousands. The next day, when she arrived for her usual beauty treatment, she was politely turned away. "I'm sorry, but we no longer have any available appointments for you, miss." She couldn't believe it. She asked what was going on, but the staff only exchanged glances and said nothing. She walked out seething with rage. She tried calling her friends, but no one answered. And when one of them finally picked up, I already knew exactly what she would say. "You buried yourself. No one wants anything to do with you." Once again, Ashley was completely alone. Third strike. Her job Ashley never really worked, but she had a small position at a marketing firm. It gave her a bit of financial independence. So I decided to take that away too. I gathered every piece of evidence that would expose who she really was. Photos of her sneaking off with her lover during work hours. Phone recordings where she reported to Luke that her husband hadn't figured out anything. Screenshots of texts where she mocked me and our arguments. Her boss called her in. She was confident it was just a routine meeting. But when he laid the documents in front of her, she collapsed into the chair as if she had been punched in the gut. "You have two options," the manager said calmly. "You resign voluntarily, or we terminate you officially for violating corporate ethics." But immediately, she packed up her things and left, not even trying to argue her case. Now, she had lost the last scrap of stability she had left. Her world was crumbling apart. She was nobody now, and this was only the beginning. I could see the fear in her eyes. But the worst was yet to come. Financial collapse. Losing her child. The complete destruction of her life. I watched her sink deeper, and I wasn't going to let her come back up for air. Step 2. The financial abyss. Ashley had always loved comfort. Expensive dresses, designer handbags, restaurants, a glass of fine wine with dinner. After which she would glance at me with disdain, as if I was nothing but an empty space in her life. She was used to living well, without worries. And most of all, she never once thought about where it all came from. She believed she deserved it all, that I was obligated to provide for her luxurious lifestyle, even though she spat in my face and cheated behind my back. But now, that resource had run dry. I took everything from her, and I did it just as methodically as I had destroyed her reputation. First blow, the bank accounts. I knew she was relying on money. She assumed that even if something went wrong, she would always have a backup plan. Our joint savings, credit cards, access to finances. She had no idea I had been preparing for war. A month before I exposed her, I had already begun to act. Transferred all our joint accounts to my name. Blocked her access to credit cards. moved the bulk of our funds to a private account only I controlled. I even left a few $1,000s in one of her accounts. On purpose. So she wouldn't realize right away that she had lost everything. So she could feel a false sense of security, believing she could still escape this. And then came the surprise. She went to the mall, deciding to buy herself something nice, something expensive, to comfort herself after her destroyed reputation. It was just a mechanical habit. Walk through boutiques, spend money, use shopping to distract herself from reality. She stepped into a high-end clothing store, picked out a $1,500 dress, tried it on, admired herself in the mirror. As if nothing had changed, as if she hadn't destroyed her own life with her own hands. She walked to the register, casually handed over her black card. Transaction declined. Ashley frowned. "Try it again, please," she told the cashier. The woman nodded, inserted the card into the machine. Transaction error. Ashley felt an icy lump form inside her. "Try this one." She pulled out another card. Insufficient funds. The cashier looked at her with polite confusion. Panic began to rise inside her. Maybe there's something wrong with the terminal? Her voice wavered slightly. "I don't think so, ma'am. Other customers are paying without any issues." Ashley hurriedly opened her banking app on her phone. Account balance. $0 on every card. On every account. On every access point. Absolute zero. She felt her breath hitch, her knees weaken. This had to be a mistake. It had to be. She bolted out of the store, straight into the crowd, turned a corner, and immediately called the bank. The dial tone. "Hello. How may I assist you? What happened to my money?" Her voice was sharp with panic. The operator asked for her details, checked the system, and after a few moments, said the words that shattered her world. The funds were transferred by the account owner. She froze. "What owner?" "This is MY Money." "I'm sorry, ma'am, but this account was registered under your spouse's name, and he changed the access permissions." "Me? I did this." And now, there was nothing she could say. Her hand trembled as she stabbed my number into her phone. "I was waiting for this call." I picked up immediately. "Evan, what the fuck?" Her voice shook with both anger and fear. I smiled, but my voice remained cold. "What are you talking about? Where is my money?" "What money?" I paused. "Oh, you mean the money you spent on dates with that pathetic excuse of a man you called a real man?" Silence. I relish in her silence. "You know, sweetheart," I continued, "you've been living off me for too long, and I thought, why not let you experience some independence?" "You can't." "I can." I cut her off. And I did. I hung up before she could launch into a tantrum. I knew she would scream, throw things, probably collapse onto the floor in a fit of rage. But I didn't care. She was just beginning to understand that the world no longer revolved around her. Second blow. The house this next strike was harsher. Ashley never really worked. Everything she had, her comfort, her lifestyle, her security, came from me, and I took it all away. The house was in my name. I changed the locks. I packed her bags and left them outside the door. That evening, after her failed shopping spree, she came home to a horrifying sight. Her belongings were stuffed into suitcases. A brand new security system with a keypad lock was installed. Her keys no longer worked. She yanked at the door handle. She rang the buzzer. She screamed like a wild animal. I walked calmly to the window, pulled the curtain aside, and looked down. She saw me. I waved. Then I closed the curtain and walked away. She no longer lived here. She no longer had a home. She had nowhere to sleep. I didn't ask where she stayed that night, and I didn't care. She deserved it. Step 3. Losing Tommy. Ashley had lost everything. She had no friends. They refused to even acknowledge her existence. She had become a laughingstock, the target of disgust and scorn. She had no money, no home, and nowhere to go. But she still clung to one last hope. Tommy. She thought that at least he would stay with her, that she could somehow use him to regain control and status. She was wrong. I would never allow my son to remain with this woman. I knew that if she walked away from this unpunished, she would seek revenge. She would use Tommy. She would manipulate him. I had prepared for this final step just as carefully as the rest. And now it was time for the final strike. I couldn't act on emotions. I needed hard, indisputable evidence that she was an unfit mother. So I gathered everything I needed. Photos of her leaving Luke's apartment late at night, forgetting about her son. Audio recordings of Tommy admitting that she made him stay silent. Testimonies from the nanny, who revealed how Ashley often left Tommy alone to go on her meetings. A psychologist's report confirming that Tommy had suffered emotional distress because of his mother's actions. It was more than enough. The judge didn't just grant me full custody. He declared Ashley a danger to our child. But before I took the final step, I wanted her to understand what was coming. She was desperate. After the financial blow, she had crashed at random acquaintances' places for a while, but now even they had kicked her out. She looked exhausted, hollow-eyed, worn down. But even now, even as her world crumbled, she still tried to cling to her old ways. One evening, as I was leaving the park with Tommy, she was waiting for us at the exit. She hurried over, trying to look confident. "Evan, we need to talk." I looked at her calmly. "About what, Ashley?" "About us. About Tommy. There is no us." Her jaw tensed. "Listen, I've been struggling. Yes, I made mistakes, but you can't just erase me from your life." I chuckled dryly. "Ashley, are you serious?" She tried to look sincere. "You can't take my son away from me. That's cruel." I leaned in slightly, my voice low and even. "Do you want to know what's cruel?" She froze. I spoke quietly, calmly, but every word hit her like a hammer. "Cruel is dragging a 5-year-old child to your lover's house and forcing him to keep quiet. Cruel is hearing your son cry because he's too scared to tell his father the truth. Cruel is thinking you'd get away with it." Her eyes widened, her lips trembled, but she still clung to one last hope. "But I'm still his mother." I smirked. "No, you're not." I pulled out the court papers and unfolded them in front of her face. Court decision. Termination of parental rights. She read the words, and something broke in her eyes. No, you can't." I stepped back, taking Tommy's hand. "You can see him one last time. Memorize it." Tommy hid behind my leg, silent. And that was what broke her the most. Not anger, not hatred, indifference. He no longer saw her as his mother. She did this to herself. "Tommy, say something to Mommy," she whispered, her voice shaking. The boy said nothing. He just tightened his grip on my hand. I turned around and walked away, never looking back. She was left standing there alone, with a court order in her hands and an emptiness inside her. She tried to fight, tried to appeal the decision, find a job, reclaim respect. But no one wanted her around anymore. She had become filth, a disgrace, a lying woman who had destroyed her own life. Now, she was alone. No money, no status, no respect, no future, and no son. I crushed her. And now I could start my life over. Without her. With a clear conscience. Because she got exactly what she deserved. Luke thought he'd get away too. He thought that a busted face and a few broken ribs were the worst things that could happen to him. He was wrong. I wasn't going to let him just disappear. I wanted him to suffer for the rest of his life. And I made sure he would never be the same again. Luke worked in a company where he was valued. He was building a career, trying to make a name for himself. But after that night with Ashley, his entire life started crumbling. I knew where he worked. I knew that his professional circle was full of influential people who hated scandals. So I sent an anonymous letter to his office. Inside, I included evidence. Photos of him leaving his house with Ashley. Recordings of phone calls where he bragged to a friend about fucking a married woman while her kids sat in the next room. Screenshots of texts where he and Ashley mocked her weak husband together. The letter landed in the right hands. Within hours, he was summoned to the director's office. The executive laid out the documents in front of him. "Explain this." Luke went pale. He tried to explain, stammering that it was all lies, that it was just his personal life, that it shouldn't matter. But the director wasn't listening. "We have a corporate reputation to uphold. You've tarnished it, but you're fired. Effective immediately." They escorted him out of the office without even giving him time to gather his things. Now he was nobody, no job, no connections, no future. But that wasn't the worst part. After that night, when I smashed him into the floor, he spent a long time recovering. His ribs healed, but something had changed. Something no longer worked. He went to doctors, underwent examinations, tried to find an explanation. And he did. The injuries he sustained in the fight had affected his male health. He could no longer have sex. He could no longer satisfy a woman. Now he was useless. He tried to hide it, but soon everyone found out. Did you hear what happened to him? He's not capable of anything anymore. Now no one will want to be with him. The women who once flocked around him turned away. He became a laughingstock. Women don't want broken men. Now he was alone. Forever. No job. No women. No sex. No purpose in life. He sat in his apartment, drinking cheap alcohol, staring at the wall, trying to understand where he had gone wrong. He looked for someone to blame, but he knew the truth. He had destroyed himself. I had simply helped him reach the end. Now, he was no longer a threat. Now, he was nothing, and that was the right punishment. After everything was over, after Luke disappeared and Ashley was left empty-handed, I could finally start over. Not with her, not with that past full of pain and betrayal, but with my son. Tommy no longer asked about his mother. He no longer waited for her calls. He no longer tried to understand why she had done what she did. He had accepted the truth. I was his family, and that was the most important thing. We moved away. I knew that this city held too many shadows of the past, too many places filled with memories. So I found us a new home, not luxurious, not too big, but cozy. Tommy loved it immediately. Dad, will I have my own room here? Of course, buddy. He smiled. And at that moment, I knew this was the right choice. I started a new job, carefully choosing a place where I could spend more time with Tommy. No more late nights at the office. No more neglecting what truly mattered. No more mistakes. What happened to Ashley? I didn't look for her. I didn't know where she lived now, and I didn't want to know. I wasn't interested in how she was surviving without money, support, or status. But sometimes, news finds you anyway. I overheard that she had moved to some rundown neighborhood, that she rented a tiny apartment, worked as a waitress or a cleaner somewhere, that she drank too much, that she tried to cling to men again, but no one stayed for long, that she regretted everything. But I didn't care. She had chosen her path. I had chosen mine. One evening, Tommy and I sat on the porch, drinking hot chocolate. The sky was clear, filled with stars. He looked at me and asked, "Dad, are we going to be happy now?" I smiled. "Yes, son. Now we will." And that was the absolute truth. We were free. Dear friends, don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell so you don't miss any new episodes. See you soon.